Hello and welcome to SAT Prep with your teacher, Mrs. Martinez. I'm a mom who just happens to be a teacher of 25 years. And my junior year daughter has come and told me that she is needing to study for the SAT. So, of course, I did what all parents do and I went out and I got her the SAT book. Whoa, that's a big book. All right. So I know that SAT testing could be really intimidating for a lot of people, students and parents alike. And I'm here to unpack all of the information that is in this SAT book for you. There's just one hitch. I'm an English teacher, so I'll be unpacking the English portion of the SAT for you. So now here's the book, right? So I open the book and usually it comes in and I give it to her and that's it. She does it or I get her a tutor. And this time I realized that maybe I want to know like what this is all about because I took the SAT eons ago, okay? I graduated high school in 1996. So a lot has changed or maybe not. I wanted to find out what this thing was all about. Okay, so I read chapter 2, chapter 3, 4, 5, 6. I got to know the SAT, and then I started reading chapters 7 through 18, which we'll cover in a little bit. And I realized something huge. I realized that when I taught elementary school, third, fourth, fifth grade, and when I taught middle school, sixth and seventh grade, I taught all of the skills that are being tested on this SAT test. Like it's ridiculous. I don't for me it was very mind-blowing because I thought, wow, if the kids get the skills that I teach and they apply them and they practice them over and over and over again, they may not need SAT tutoring because they're going to be completely proficient and skilled and ready for this test. Boom. Mind blown. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is go over this part 1 right here, okay? Because it has the getting to know you, right? So we're going to get to know the digital SAT, and I'm not going to read it word for word, obviously. I have made notes, so I'll take you through my notes and I'll just pinpoint the necessary stuff, okay? So that's where we're going to go next. Okay, so the first thing that I want to point out is this promise up here. By using this book as part of your preparation for test day, you can be confident that you have access to all the resources you need to succeed. So they literally make you a promise that if you use this book and you have all the skills necessary to tackle the SAT, you're going to do really, really well. Okay? Now, let's look down here. It says, because the SAT shares the same goal as your high school courses, you get that? Because the SAT shares the same goal as your high school courses, preparing you for the next stage of your educational career, you should expect that the questions on the SAT will ask you to demonstrate the same sorts of skills and knowledge you use every day in your classes. Now, this is huge because, a lot of kids are like, well, I don't know why we have to learn this. Well, you do, and there's a reason, right? Every step of the way leads you to the next phase of your life. And trust me that I have learned that the more you know, the more you're able to communicate, the more you're able to think critically about things, the more you're able to assimilate new information. So, as we prepare our children for high school and for the SAT and for college, we need to make sure that we are putting importance on these skills that they are learning. Okay. Don't just say, oh, I don't know why you're learning this skill. No, every skill that they learn is for a reason. Now, with that being said, we need to make sure that they're learning skills. So, this is a side note, but I would like for you to look up the standards for ELA for your state and just look through them, keep them handy, And if you see that your son or daughter isn't learning these skills that are part of the state standard for your state, then there is a problem. Okay. So, I'm not here to bash anything, but I do want to say that there are a lot of ELA classes out there that focus on reading and answering questions and not so much skills. Okay. Skills should be taught in ELA, and we'll get into that later on. But just take a gander at the state standards for your state. Okie dokie. So the next part that I want to look at is this part up here where it talks about the difficulty of the SAT questions. So the questions are what's difficult here, not the uh not the passages. So let's read real quick what it says. The difficulty of SAT questions, in other words, comes from the sophistication of the skills and knowledge you're asked to demonstrate. Okay, so did everybody get that? It comes from the sophistication of the skills. Now, I need you to remember that because it's really important. Skills are the name of the game. Okay, so it says, by contrast, the wording of the test passages and questions, as well as the tasks you're presented with, are meant to be as clear and comprehensible as possible. Okay, so what does this mean? This means that for those teachers that are just doing short stories and answering questions, and they're kind of like leveling up the stories, right, that they use and not leveling up the skills that they're teaching, are doing it all wrong. Because here, it clearly says the sophistication of the skills. The passages are meant to be presented as clear and comprehensible as possible. So the skills are the things that level up in difficulty. Okay? So that's number one. That's why I really want you to look up the skills for your state, because you need to know if your child is being taught these skills. And if not, you need to go and get them the teaching because they need it. And this can't wait until junior year to be taught. It has to be taught starting in 4th grade, and it has to be continued all the way up until junior, senior year. Okay? All right. The last thing I wanted to point out in the introduction of this book is right here. Let me get my pencil. Right here, where it says, the single best preparation you can undertake for the digital SAT is what you're already doing. Actively engaging in your classes. Actively engaging in your classes, meaning listening, taking notes, reading your textbook, learning the skills for success. You need to actively participate in your classes. It says the main purpose of specific preparation for the digital SAT are for you to become comfortable with the kinds of questions and learn to pace yourself during the test. That's really what SAT prep is all about. But the real preparation is in your own schools, in your own classes, day in and day out, learning not only the content, but the skills. Now, this is chapter 2, getting to know the digital SAT. Okay. And the only thing that I want to look at here is right here. Okay. A reading and writing section is included in the digital SAT, which measures your ability to apply reading and writing skills. I'm going to circle every time I see the word skills because this is going to be very good for me later on. And knowledge you've gained in your classes in English language arts and other subjects. So again, the skills. Download those standards because those standards have the skills that your children should be learning in literature, in nonfiction text, in writing, in poetry, in cross-curricular. Like, it has everything. So do me a favor, and tonight's homework, download the ELA standards for your state. Okay? Because it all boils down to the skills. That's where it's at. We are still in chapter 2. This is now page 13, and it talks about other subject areas. Okay, so I'm going to read it and then I'm going to unpack it. All reading and writing questions and some math questions are set in one of a range of academic subject areas such as history, social studies, and science. We do this for two main reasons. And first, the digital SAT tests the skills and knowledge. Again, look at that, skills and knowledge you've developed in your classes. It therefore makes sense and is beneficial to you to get questions in the subjects you've studied in school. Secondly, the digital SAT is a test of your college and career readiness. Therefore, it allows that your readiness should be tested in relation to the kinds of classes you'll have to take after high school. Okay, so we're not going to have questions on historical events or on humanities or on science concepts, but you are going to get passages, nonfiction text, right, about that content area. So what you're reading could be historical. What you're reading could be science related. What you're reading could be in the humanities. Okay. But the questions are the skills and knowledge that you learned in your English classes. Okay. You understand? So the passage or the text that you get is set in a subject area like history or science or humanities. But the question is the skill that you learned in your English class. And by the way, the digital SAT is adaptive, which means that you get questions from 6th through 8th grade, then 9th through 11th, and then 12th through the first 2 years of college, which they call 14th grade. Okay. So you advance as you move along, or they will keep you along the same line and score you that way. So it's adaptive depending on how well you do on those questions. Okay, they will move you up, but if you fail the higher questions, then they'll keep you at the last level that you were proficient at, and that's how they acquire a score. Okay. Okay, down here is another area that I want to look at. It says, we take great pains to ensure that digital SAT questions set in academic contexts are as authentic as possible. This means that the reading and writing passages and informational graphics, as well as math questions set in context, present the kinds of topics and ask the kinds of questions that you'd encounter in challenging high school courses, as well as in the first year courses at the college level. Your knowledge of and experience with these subjects, therefore, can be beneficial on the digital SAT, as courses in these subjects teach you how to read, write, and reason in the specific ways required in these fields. Okay? So again, pay attention and learn in the classes. That is the way to master the SAT. And there's one last thing in chapter 2 that I want to bring to your attention. The ability to read complex texts is a key indicator of students' college and career readiness. So you need to be able to read complex text. This doesn't mean that it's going to be like Shakespearean language. No, this means that they will be complex in the vocabulary that they use, in the structure that they use, and in the sentence structure that they use. So the composition of the passage of the essay or of the text that you're reading will be complex. You will not have all simple sentences like you would in 4th grade or 3rd grade. Okay. So it does get more complex, but the skills are what range in difficulty. Remember that. Okay. So the way to tackle complex text is by learning how to annotate. So please make sure that your child is learning annotation skills in their school. If not, teach them, because annotating complex text is a must. Okay, so we're jumping right to chapter 7 because the chapters in between talk about the scoring and how they score it and how you can prepare for other exams as well as the SAT using this book. So, fast forward, this talks about reading and writing, which is what I want to talk to you about. So, it says that in the reading and writing section, you'll answer questions that test your ability to read, analyze, and use information and ideas in passages and explain how and why authors make the choices that they do. Revise the passages to improve how information and ideas are expressed, and edit passages so that they meet expectations of standard English, sentence structure, usage, and punctuation. Okay, so if your child is not writing or being taught writing instruction in school, this is going to severely hurt their acquisition of skills in order to do well on this SAT. Now, remember, SAT prep is basically working on the timing, the pacing, the types of questions, and test taking strategies. But the skills that are being assessed are skills that are being taught from fourth grade all the way to junior year. So we need to make sure that we are really honing in on these skills every single year so that, yes, you do the test prep and you do the pacing and the timing and the process of elimination and the types of questions and all of that, but the skills need to be in place, because no matter how much tutoring you get for the SAT, they cannot possibly teach you the amount of skills that you need to learn from fourth all the way to 11th grade in a few months. It's just not going to happen. So you need to be vigilant and you need to make sure that in your child's school, they are teaching your child how to write, because these reading skills come from teaching children how to write. They're not going to learn what a thesis is by reading an essay. They're going to learn what a thesis is by writing an essay. So make sure you know those standards. Go and look up the standards for your state and be very clear on what your child needs to be learning in school. And if they're not learning it, find out why and ask questions. All right, just a couple more FYI kind of little paragraphs that I've highlighted here. So let's look at this one right here. It says passages in the reading and writing section represent the subject areas of literature, historical, or history, or social studies, humanities, and science. It's helpful to pay attention to the subject area of a given passage because different subjects convey information and ideas in different ways. And knowing something about how each subject shares knowledge can give you an edge in responding to a question. Whoa, that's huge. So, I develop courses for middle school kids in order to prepare them with these skills so that they could be successful in high school and in these kinds of tests. And the first big course that I teach is on text structure, because if they don't know the structure that information is presented in, it's going to be really hard for them to answer questions and do well on a test, like a cold read, or like, their SAT when they take it in school, or whatever standardized test they're taking. Okay, so knowing how content is presented in specific subject areas is, oh my gosh, it's so big. It's huge. So in history, let's talk about that. It's mostly sequence, cause and effect, right? In science, you've got a lot of compare and contrast. You've got a lot of description. You've got a lot of cause and effect. In the humanities, you might have a lot of description. You might have a lot of sequence. You need to understand text structure and how that is applied to content area courses. If you're not learning that in school, you need to learn it in any way that you can. You need to learn it, because this is going to help you when you take the SAT. Okay, something else that I want to look at is here. The three text types represented in the reading and writing section are literary, informative, explanatory, and argumentative. Guys, this is writing. And this is what schools avoid. They avoid writing, and I don't know why. And that's why kids have such a hard time on cold reads or on tests. They do really well in classwork and they do really well in projects. But when it comes to a test where they have to read a passage and answer questions, they bomb it. If that is your child, it's because they are not learning the skills. Okay. So argumentative writing has its own skill set. Explaining something has its own skill set. Literary works, a short story, a novel, has its own skill set. If they're not familiar with plot diagram or the plot of a story, if they're not familiar with essay structure, with the parts of an introduction, the parts of a conclusion, the parts of a body paragraph, they're going to do really badly in this portion. Like, come on, let's teach them the skills. Okay, let's look at the last thing that I wanted to talk about right here on page 47 of the digital SAT manual. It is text complexity again, because text complexity is big and annotating helps ease the complexity of a text. Now, in order to annotate, you need to learn the skills, right? You need to learn text structure. You need to learn figurative language. You need to learn plot. You need to learn the parts of an essay in order to annotate. So all of that comes first, and then we annotate, and then it takes a complex text and it just breaks it up into bite-sized pieces that we can understand. All right, so let's look at what it says here. Text complexity is a measure of how easy or difficult a given passage is. When we develop reading and writing passages, they get assigned to one of three text complexity bands: grades 6 through 8, grades 9 through 11, and grades 12 through 14. A given passage's text complexity is based on a number of factors, such as how long and sophisticated or how short and straightforward its sentences are, how challenging or familiar its vocabulary is, and how much information it conveys and at what rate. So I think I've said this before, or maybe not, but it is leveling up the passage. But if we learn how to annotate, it'll break it all down into those bite-sized pieces that we need in order to make sense of a text. Okay? Let's look at the questions really quickly. It says that all questions in the reading and writing section are multiple choice, which means that your child needs to be taught how to use the process of elimination in order to cross out answers that are wrong and get to the right answer. Okay? So look what it says here. Your task on this day will be figuring out the best answer for each question and using your reading and writing skills and knowledge. Yes. So this means the process of elimination. That's what that means. Okay. It says each question is self-contained and can be answered on its own without reference to any other question. So you know how like when, I don't know about you, but when I used to take tests in high school, you would kind of like star a question and then go on. And sometimes the other questions had the answer to the one that you had difficulty on or with. That's not going to happen here. Okay. So, and because it's digital, like you're not going to be able to see or like flip back. You're going to be able to go back, but it's going to be kind of like a hassle. So it says that each question is self-contained and can be answered on its own without reference to any other question. So I just thought that that was interesting because back in the day, it wasn't like that. This is where the good stuff starts coming up. Okay, so we are on page 49. And it says up here that the first two domains are information and ideas and craft and structure. Okay, mainly these domains test reading skills, while the second two domains, expression of ideas and standard English conventions, test writing skills. This really makes me excited because, yeah, this is what I teach. And I love teaching skills, because if you could teach skills, then they could take those skills and they can go to town in any class and they're going to be so successful. And I love for kids to be successful. So this is great. Okay, information and ideas and craft and structure. Now, if your child has a textbook and your teacher is using the textbook, they probably are hitting these skills. All right. But if your child is going to, let's say, a private school and the teacher just picks different books and doesn't really apply the skill to those books or short stories or novels, then you might be in a little bit of trouble because they're not teaching skills, they're teaching content, which might be a bad thing. Okay. So again, look up the skills for your state or the standards for your state and make sure that your child is getting the skills that they need in order to be successful in reading and in writing. All right, so next thing we're going to look at is down here, because I think this chart does a really great job of kind of summarizing all this stuff up here. All right. Reading and writing section content domains. So you've got information and ideas, craft and structure, expression of ideas, and standard English conventions. So the big idea for information and ideas is focusing on questions that test the understanding of what you read, meaning central idea and details, command of evidence, textual and quantitative, and inferencing. I teach all of this in my races course. So this is called Races. And if you don't know what that is, you can YouTube it. It's an amazing way to answer open-ended questions. But as you answer these open-ended questions, you are working on the skills needed in order to tackle information and ideas, which are central ideas and details and command of evidence. Okay. I teach restate, answer, cite text evidence, explain the evidence, which is elaboration, and in the answer, they learn inferencing. Okay. So that check, we tackle it. Next thing we need to look at is craft and structure. Questions in this domain test your understanding of how and why authors write the way they do. How and why. Do you know what that means? That's analysis. That's what I teach in my literary analysis course. And this sets them up for AP courses and obviously the SAT. Okay. So, what skills and knowledge are they going to be assessed on here is words in context, so vocabulary and context clues, text structure and purpose, and cross text connections. This we tackle in our writing basics course. Okay, where I teach all of these skills because they need them. Obviously, craft and structure. If you don't know how to craft a piece of literature or a piece of text, then you're not going to know how other people craft it. So if they're not doing writing in their school or in their classes, they need to be doing writing. Okay. All right. And then expression of ideas. This is a little bit higher up. This is more high school because we're talking about rhetorical analysis. We're talking about transitions. Okay, so let's look at the big idea. Questions in this domain test their ability to revise passages and to meet particular writing goals. So revision, again, if they're not being taught writing and revising and grammar, they are going to not have the skills that they need in order to have expression of ideas. Okay. So this is all about sentence structure, word choice, ideas, transitions. Basically, everything that you learn in grammar is in expression of ideas. So if your child's classes from 4th all the way to 11th grade are not teaching writing, like composition, like writing, or grammar, they are going to be in really deep trouble here in these three. Okay. I mean, Nowhere does it talk about just reading and answering questions. It's about the development of ideas and what authors do. And if they're not authoring, they're not going to know. Okay. And then the last thing is standard English conventions, editing. So this is revising. And here we have editing. Okay. So questions in this domain test your ability to edit passages for conventional sentence structure, usage, and punctuation. This is editing. Okay. Form, structure, and just making it all look pretty and putting it together with a big red bow. That's what we do when we edit our paragraphs and our essays. All right. So this is it in a nutshell, what your child needs to learn to be proficient on the SAT. Okay. And it's 100% skills based. So if they are not learning the skills that they need in school, then they need to learn them elsewhere, because this prepares them for that SAT. And we all know that we want big, nice scores on those SATs. So now we're moving on to chapter 8, reading and writing passages. Let's look at that little blip that I circled and put an asterisk on. Okay, so it says this information will help you unpack the passages you read during practice and on test days so that you're better prepared to answer associated test questions correctly. Over the course of this chapter, we'll demonstrate 3 strategies for unlocking the meaning of reading and writing passages. Number 1, determining the passage's main purpose, which is author's purpose. Number 2, identifying the central or main idea of a text and of a paragraph. And number 3, analyzing its structure, which is text structure, compare and contrast, cause and effect, problem solution, description, sequence. Using one or more of these strategies can help you obtain a high-level grasp of each passage, which can in turn help you answer whatever question you're ultimately presented with. Wow! Those are all the skills that I teach also. I'm very, 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 very happy. Again, if your child does not know what author's purpose is, if they don't know how to identify a central idea, and if they don't know text structure, get them help. But get them help in order to learn those skills, okay? Well, I think I went a little nuts here highlighting, but there's a lot of good stuff here. So let's look at it. First paragraph right here. Each passage belongs to one of 4 subject areas. We've already talked about this, but it's good to repeat it. Literature, history, social studies, the humanities, and science. This is important because the test passages, as well as the real-world texts in these areas, convey information and ideas in different ways by subject and having differing concerns, or things that authors writing in these subjects care about and are trying to communicate to readers. So, what do they want our kids to learn? They want our kids to learn that when people write, no matter how they write, that they understand. Because at the end of the day, writing is communicating, and the author is talking to you. And the listener or the reader has to understand and interpret the message that the author is trying to give. Okay? So this is simply all about author's purpose. And it says that they convey information and ideas in differing ways because they have differing concerns. Okay? All right. So let's move on down here. Let's look at this paragraph right here. As we analyze, I'm going to circle that word because that's so important. Oh my God, analyzing in middle school. We need to learn how to analyze. As we analyze a sample passage from each of the 4 subject areas mentioned above, right? Literature, history, social studies, humanities, and science. We'll consider how we can determine the main purpose and the central or main idea of each passage. Okay. A statement of the passage's main purpose focuses on the author's aim in writing the text and is phrased in terms of what the author is trying to accomplish and why. So you see this word right here? That connects you straight back to analysis. Statements of purpose generally contain 2 elements. A verb signaling intent, such as to persuade, to convince, or to explain. That means you need to know those types of writing. What does that entail? And then a that or in order to clause, signaling more specifically what the author is trying to do, such as persuade the reader that the proposed policy should be adopted, or to explain why the experiment likely failed in order to prevent similar failures by other scientists. So author's purpose. Does your child know author's purpose? They need to know author's purpose. They need to know why an author writes what they write and how they get their content across. All right, let's move on to the central idea portion here. It says a statement of a passage's central idea, on the other hand, summarizes the informational content of the passage. Statements of central ideas are factual in content and are typically phrased as declarative sentences, such as researchers found that the new method of crop rotation increased yields by 30% on average. So the concepts of main purpose and central ideas are closely related. Main purpose is about why the author is writing, whereas central idea is about what the author is trying to communicate. Okay, so we need to know what their purpose is and how they are trying to communicate it. Okay, so I'm going to have to go and use both sides here for a second. Let's look at literature. Literature for a moment right here. Authors write literary texts mainly to share ideas and experiences, real or fictional, in vivid, memorable ways that engage readers at many levels, intellectually, emotionally, morally. Works of literature come in many forms, including novels, dramas, and poems. See, if they don't know and they've not dissected or annotated or studied literature, they're going to be at a loss. So make sure your child is getting the skills that they need in order to thrive. These forms differ in many specifics. They all exhibit literary techniques such as evocative word choice, telling, revealing characterization, like directly or indirectly, details, telling details, revealing characterization, and figurative language such as symbolism, metaphors, similes, onomatopoeia, personification, and all those other idioms, and all those good figurative language examples. For literature questions in the reading and writing section, the reading skills they've developed in their English language arts classes are most applicable. Okay, so again, in middle school, I'm very big on figurative language because it just helps bring their writing to life. I love teaching them how to spot it in the literature that we read so that therefore they can take note of it and use it when they write their own pieces. Figurative language makes the writing funny. It can make it dramatic. It could be used to persuade or convince or argue. So knowing figurative language is a huge plus in your academics, in your life, in your business as you get older and you start a business. It's huge. So, and they need to learn it for the SAT. I'm just really proud that I teach all of this stuff. So if all else fails, you've got back to basics. That's all I got to say. All right. So literature passages in the reading and writing section include excerpts, meaning shorter pieces from previously published novels, short stories, plays, poems, as well as works of literary nonfiction, such as memoirs and personal essays. Okay. So there will be a broad range of authors, styles, perspectives, and time periods, including works produced by writers from the United States and around the world, which is why we study British Lit and why we study, other pieces from other areas like, I don't know, South American authors, we'll do German authors, we'll do Indian authors, right? Because we want a wide range of reading here. Okay. So you've got classic and contemporary works and, stuff that you know and stuff that you don't really know. Okay. The point is, an author has an idea. What idea do they have? And how do they convey that idea? what word choice style do they have? What figurative language um, do they use, right, to create drama or humor? Okay. You need to learn what these pieces are so that when they're put together in a passage or in a writing assignment or in an essay, you know how they've been constructed. Okay, we are back for the rest of the session. And today we're going to be talking about the other stuff that's included with the passage that kids might not take note of. And as they read widely on a variety of topics, they need to understand that the author is important to know and to research and to get background on. And this is what the test gives you. It gives you background on the author, it gives you background on the time period, and all of this helps to give you a good understanding of what the passage entails. So right here, it tells you not to skip the background info. It says, we suggest that you do not skip over this information, as knowing who the author is and when the author was writing may help you properly set your expectations for what you're going to read. For instance, if the work was originally published in the 19th century, you can reasonably expect that the vocabulary and style of writing will differ from what we have in more modern literature. Okay. This introductory material may include context that will help you understand the passage, like the purpose or the main idea of what the author is trying to tell you. Okay. It could also give you a description of the setting or a quick summary. So we need to make sure that when we read, like in our textbook, it always gives you like a little summary or a little background piece that's in italics. Don't skip that. Put importance on that, because that's what they need to do on the SAT. And I mean, this goes anywhere from 4th grade or even 3rd grade all the way to 11th grade. They're always going to give you like a little summary in the textbook of, what's going on or what was going on during that time when the author wrote what he wrote. That's also equally important. Okay, so something that I want to look at really quickly is this part right here. They just gave me a little blip about The Great Gatsby right here. And they're talking about a word. Let me see. Punctilious or punctilious. Punctilious. Okay, I've never heard that word before. Punctilious. And they're talking about using context clues down here. All right. Now, I know that context clues are usually taught and practiced in 3rd grade, and then it kind of dwindles from there, but it should not. You should be tackling context clues throughout from 4th grade or 3rd grade all the way to junior, senior year, because context clues never go out of style. You never grow out of context clues. There's always words that you don't know and always clues to lead you to the definition. So make sure that your child is learning context clues. Look what it says here. If you don't know what punctilious means, you should still be able to get the basic idea of the word from more accessible information available to you. In this case, you can examine the language and structure of the passage's second sentence to figure out an approximate meaning for punctilious. Now, this is part of the standards, the core standards that your child needs to learn in their elementary, upper elementary, middle school, and high school curriculum. So be familiar with these standards. Another thing I wanted to point out is here, I wanted you to see how kids should learn to tackle questions. Okay. Yes, there is one right answer, but kids should not be taught to answer the question by looking for the right answer. They need to, number one, restate the question, and number two, restate and read each answer with the restate. Okay. So we need to do 3 things: restate the question, read the answer choice with the restate, and then use the process of elimination, meaning to cross out the ones that we know are not the right answer, so that we are left with 2 choices that are similar and then we can analyze those two choices. So we are trying to take out the garbage and then focus on the ones that really are in competition with each other. Okay. Again, if your child is not being taught test taking skills and process of elimination, then we need to get them help in that manner, because that it's expected. These are skills that they need to learn in order to do well on standardized tests and on tests in general. So again, if your child is struggling on cold reads or on any tests, but doing well in school, like in homework assignments, class assignments, but then they fail the test, it could be something as simple as they don't have the right skills for test taking. Okay. So let me just read here. I think it says there's probably a lot you could still figure out, and even getting a general sense of the main purpose or central idea can go a long way towards helping you eliminate incorrect answer choices. So even here, they tell you to eliminate incorrect answer choices. So I've already told you that learning text structure is really important. Cause and effect, compare and contrast, problem and solution, sequence and description. Really, really important. When kids are reading for social studies, which I'm going to just give you a little side note here. In middle school and in high school, teachers often teach with PowerPoint presentations, and students hardly ever crack open a history book. That is detrimental. Teachers should be having children read their textbooks, because if not, they will not be able to understand the structures that the authors are using to impart information. Okay? If your child is solely studying PowerPoint presentations to study for their tests, that is not the way to go. They will not get what they need. Okay? So make sure that the child is reading the textbook and outlining and looking for structures and key details, because all of that is going to help strengthen them for the SAT or for any standardized test that they will take. All right, so let's look at, we're on page 58. It says, these passages, and they're talking about historical passages here, okay? Historical or social studies passages that they're going to see on the SAT. May stress time or sequence relationships. That's text structure. What happened before, after, at the same time as another event. Causal relationships. That's cause and effect, okay? What happened because of another event. And they might also focus on comparative relationships, right? Compare and contrast, one quantity greater or less than another. Tracing these relationships is critical to success on many of the questions associated with history and social studies passages. Text structures. Kids need to know what they are, what the clue words are, how to identify them, how to write them so that they can succeed on the SAT. Okay? And it says here, reading and analyzing history and social studies passages will call most directly on your skill in and experience with reading texts in history and social studies classes. Again, if they are only focusing on PowerPoints that their teacher is giving them, that is no good. They are not going to do well on the SAT. And imagine you've got for third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 9 years that you could be preparing for this test. If you do the right things in 9 years, you should score perfectly well on the SAT. I mean, you might not get, questions that are college level, so you might not get a 1600, or I'm sorry, you might not get an 800 in reading, but you will at least know everything that you need to know by 11th grade. So again, if they're not reading a science textbook, if they're not reading a social studies textbook, if they're not identifying text structure, that's where the problems occur. And that's where you get those low test scores that we really don't want. We want them to be able to use what they've learned in school and easily pass this test with flying colors. Look at what it says down here. Our analysis of this passage shows, because they analyzed a history passage, Paying close attention to text structures enables us to gain a rich understanding of the content of the passage. Okay? Even though you may have little or no prior, let's go back up here, familiarity with the topic of whether posture affects cognition, that's what the paragraph was about, you can follow what the passage is saying by by focusing on how the passage is organized and presents relationships among the ideas and information it discusses. So again, I cannot enforce the fact that you need to learn text structures to be proficient on the SAT enough. This is huge, and this will make a difference between a high score, a mediocre score, and a low score. All right, we are heading now towards humanities. What do humanities passages have, and what do our kids need to do with these passages? Now, I'm going to tell you this. This is really important that we're going through the different types of subject areas, because this just proves to you that English needs to be a skills-based class, that they apply those skills to other content areas. I will say it again. A lot of teachers treat English as a content class. Read and answer questions. That's not what it's for. English is a skills-based class. You learn the skills and you apply them in other content areas. This is what the SAT is showing us. I don't know why schools are not enforcing this in their English programs. I mean, textbooks focus on skills, but then teachers give up textbooks and focus only on novels and short stories to answer questions. They need to be learning the skills. Okay, so let's look at the humanities. So authors write humanities texts mainly to share ideas and insights about culture, literature, art, language, and philosophy. They inform readers about particular works of art or their creators. They analyze the arguments of philosophers past and present and make and support argumentative claims about cultural phenomena. So you see here, argumentative claims. They need to know argumentative writing in order to do well on these types of questions. Okay? It says down here, humanities passages in the reading and writing section are more like movie reviews than movies themselves. They explain, illuminate, or make and defend claims about the products, expressions, and values of human culture. Like literature passages, humanities passages use vivid language and telling details. But because humanities passage seeks to inform, explain, or convince, they also have a lot in common with history and social studies and science passages. For example, they present central ideas or claims, flesh out these points with support and evidence, and establish sequential, comparative, and cause-effect relationships. There we go again. Figurative language, argumentative essay structure, and text structure. Causational relationships, comparative relationships, sequential relationships, description, and problem solution relationships. Okay? Alrighty. So that basically proves my point that text structures is super important. Ask your child, do you know what text structures are? Have you written or identified cause and effect, compare and contrast, sequence, description, problem and solution in your classes? If they are not doing this on a regular basis, they will not be prepared for this test. The last subject area that we're going to look at is science. Authors write science texts mainly to convey ideas and findings from research in the natural sciences, such as earth science, biology, chemistry, and physics, all classes that your child will be taking before they take the SAT. Like history and social studies passages in the reading and writing section, science passages typically have elements of research reports, research questions, hypotheses, discussions of previous research, descriptions of methodology, data, findings, implications, and recommendations for future research. Let's look down here. Look at what you can expect to find. You can expect to find relationships between and among information and ideas foregrounded in science passages. Just as in history and social studies passages, Science passages, like their historical counterparts, may stress time or sequence, cause and effect, or compare and contrast relationships, more than one type of relationship. Understanding these relationships is vital to understanding science passages and to answering many of the reading and writing text questions correctly. Text structure. I really like this page. This is page 69 from the digital SAT book because it breaks down the passage subject areas and it gives you bullet points. So it's really great. It says literature passages are taken from previously published novels, short stories, dramas, poems, and works of literary nonfiction like memoirs, personal essays. We read that. So, of course, that's going to be a bullet. It's notable for its word choice, its details, and figurative language. So this basically tells you exactly what you need to be focusing on to prepare. Make sure they're reading excerpts from novels, short stories, dramas, and literary nonfiction, and make sure that they are focusing on figurative language, word choice, and telling details, which actually are called showing details, descriptive details. Okay, that's what they should be focusing on in literature. Then in history, social studies, and science, look what it says there. They are written for the test. Okay, it differs from they differ from each other in that history and social studies passages focus on people and societies, while science passages focus on natural phenomena. We know that. They tend to include elements of research reports, research questions, hypotheses, discussions of previous. We just read that. Okay, and then the signal words are very, very important for sequence, cause and effect, compare and contrast, and they need to know those sequence keywords, those cause and effect keywords, compare and contrast keywords. They also need to know coordinate conjunctions and subordinate conjunctions. But although, on the other hand, those little phrases will give them clues as to the structure as well. Then in the humanities, it's also written for the text. So you're going to get passages that are written specifically for the text, for the test. And it shares information and insights about culture, literature, art, language, and philosophy. So obviously the content is going to be very different. And it's similar to literature passages in that they tend to feature evocative language and those descriptive details. Okay. It differs from literature passage in that their main aim is to inform, explain, or convince and not to entertain. So this is just comparing the subject area passages one from the other. Okay. So history, social studies, and science are very similar. You know that social studies focuses on people and events and places, whereas science focuses on natural phenomenon in the world. Literature is taken from stories that are built to entertain. Humanities have the same language, same details, but are more to inform. Okay, so I think that this is a really cool kind of, bulleted notes that you can use to just keep track of what your child is learning. Okay, again, let's look right up here. It says in the reading and writing passages, they use three main strategies that they're going to continue to employ throughout the rest of the chapter. Determining the main purpose of the passage, so author's purpose, determining the central idea of the passage, finding the main idea, and analyzing the passage structurally, so the text structure. Okay, those are the three things that they need to be very proficient in order to do well on the passages. And here is another little table that's just very convenient and very quick. Literary, the main purpose is to share ideas and insights into the human condition in order to entertain and enlighten. Informative and explanatory is to convey factual information and ideas or to explain a process, procedure, or phenomenon. And argumentative is to convince readers to accept the rightness of a claim using logical reasoning and relevant evidence. So if they are not focusing on author's purpose, main idea, and text structure, in English class as the skills to learn, then again, they need to be taught. Now we're going to talk about text features. That's different from text structure. Features, the way that I explain it to my students is like walking into a house, right? You walk into a friend's house and you look around and you see picture frames and you see vases with flowers and you'll see decor, right? Those are the features of the house. Well, the features of a text are things that are outside the written paragraphs. So they could be tables and bar graphs and line graphs. You'll have titles and you will have captions, photographs, diagrams, and labels. All of those are additional to what the author is writing. So on the SAT, they will be using text features to ask you questions, okay? They are going to be asking you to locate data. They are going to be asking you to interpret data. And they are going to be asking you to make connections between the data. What they will not be asking you to do is perform calculations, okay? So you need to be learning text features in your classes. In science, you need to be focusing on the graphing, the pie charts, the maps, okay? You need to be analyzing data because that is what you are going to be required to know by 11th grade on the SAT, okay? So text features. There's a lot of information in here. We're moving on to chapter 11, reading and writing. The questions that ask for information and ideas. Okay, so about 26% of the test or the reading and writing section is made up of information and idea questions. Okay, what do you need to focus on? There is something or a strategy, not something, a strategy called RACES. RACES is restate, answer with an inference, cite text evidence, elaborate or explain, and summarize. That's what RACES stands for, okay? So now, what do you need to be proficient in for this section? You need to be able to locate or reasonably infer the main point of a passage and to identify and use supporting details. So your child needs to learn key ideas and elaboration, and they need to learn inferencing, okay? Inferencing, key details, and elaboration. They also need to have command of evidence. So here it says they're going to test their ability to identify and use either textual evidence or quantitative data found in the passage in any accompanying informational graphic to support or challenge points or claims. So if they are not writing open-ended questions that require a race strategy to be implemented, problem. If they are using races in their curriculum and they are practicing the races strategy, then great. You are on track, and that is going to be amazing. Races deals with central ideas, details, evidence, and inferencing. So the more they practice the races strategy, which also is being practiced in AP writing. If anyone is taking an AP course, races is required in order to create a literary analysis or an argumentative essay with evidence. Okay, this is all about analyzing text. All right, so let's look at inferencing now. Inference questions are going to test your ability to draw reasonable text-based conclusions from what you've read in passages. So inferencing just means you're taking the details and you're drawing a conclusion. You're coming up with a main idea or you're coming up with an idea. Okay? And again, each question has a single best answer and 3 incorrect answers. And that are called distractors. So they need to learn to use the process of elimination when they are taking multiple choice tests. Okay, so we're going to look right here. Central ideas and details ask you to determine the main point of a given passage and to identify and make use of supporting details. So in a paragraph, you have a main idea, key details that go back to that main idea. And the way that I teach it is I do a high five paragraph. The main idea of the paragraph goes here. And then these are all what we call key details because they all can physically touch the main idea. The elaborations are necessary, but they don't touch the main idea. Okay. They are the fingernails. So they're on the backs of the key details. So without the key details, the elaborations cannot exist, right? So again, your main idea is here. The key details are touching the main idea. That's your fingers, right? They all lead into the main idea. And then the elaborations are on the backs of the key details. Okay. That's how I teach it because they need to know the difference. If they're asking you for a key detail, it's got to flow into the main idea. If not, it's an elaborative detail. Okay. So it says here, when you are asked to determine the main point or the central idea of a passage, the answer you choose should capture all of the important information and ideas in the passage. Answer choices that only reflect some of the information will be incorrect. That's how they get you. In case you're wondering, I'm on page 103 if you do have this book and you're following along. One of the things that I love about this practice book is that they explain the thinking. So if you know, I'm going to have both pages open right now. Here you have a sample question, and then over here you have an evaluation of the answer choices, which is amazing. And it's something that I do in my class. I do take time to review the quizzes that I give them or the tests that I give them. And I always encourage them. And yes, it takes a lot of time. A lot of times they are taking a test for the full 90 minutes of my class because I ask them to justify their answers. And when we review, those justifications are required. You cannot just say the best answer is D. That's not going to fly. You have to tell why. And here they give an explanation of why D is the best answer and why the other three choices are not the right answer. So in my class, I will start by saying which one is not the right answer. And then they'll say A, and I'll say why. And they're going to have to explain their thinking. I don't think we give kids enough time to explain their thinking, and that is necessary. It is 100% necessary because if they cannot explain why they do something, then it's a 25% chance that they're going to get it right. Okay, we need to give these kids the tactics, the strategies for actually doing things with intent and not just haphazardly. Okay, they need to know why they're doing stuff and not just guessing. Okay, because they can say, oh, because the other three are wrong. No, that's not explaining your thinking. We are moving right along to commands of evidence. Now, I am sure that especially if you're in Florida and you've done Common Core and the FSA and the FAST test and you have the textbook and you're doing the cold reads from the textbook, they always have a two-part question, part A, part B. So they'll ask a question where they have to infer the answer based on what they know, and then they'll have a part B where they have to give evidence for what they picked on the top, right? If in case you're wondering why they do that, it's because they're going to need to know how to do this on this SAT. Everything is done for a reason. Okay, so let's read command of evidence. Command of evidence questions assess your ability to make use of both textual evidence and quantitative data in a passage and in informational graphics to answer associated questions. Those are those text features, okay? They will have to recognize and make use of evidence in the form of facts, figures, quotations, data, and other things like that, okay? As you read, write, look at that. As you read and write, make sure your kid is writing, participate in discussions and make presentations in high school and college classes, as well as in the workplace and everyday life. So this is part of our presentations. This is, if I am trying to sell you a product, I need to give you research and I need to interpret that research and give you the reason why it connects to what I am offering you in order to convince you to buy my product. Okay? This is a life skill. So do not overlook these types of questions on these tests. I mean, if I were you, I would get a fast, let me see, I have a bunch, or any state test, right, book, and just do the reading comprehension questions, okay? Because they will help. It will help, all right? We have the fast. God knows what the name will be next year, but we have the fast for today. All right, so command of evidence, really, really important. Now, let's look at something else over here. So with a question on the SAT, you're first going to be presented with a claim. They need to know what a claim is. A claim is something that we assert. It's an assertion. It is our thesis, okay? And then you'll have to determine which of the answer choices best supports that claim in a way that is indicated by the question itself. So evidence, inference, a claim, and evidence. That's called the racist strategy. If your child is not familiar with it, they can learn how to use it on YouTube. And I do have a digital course on the racist strategy that is very simple that kids can expand on from there. But it is very simple. I always start basic, and then they can take it to the next level. So they need to learn the racist strategy. Chapter 12 gives us the questions or example questions for information and ideas, which we just did, which is awesome. And then chapter 13 talks about the types of questions that you're going to get for craft and structure. So let's look at that next. Now, 28% of the text is going to be made up of craft and structure questions. Text structure, words in context, meaning context clues, okay? Structure and purpose, which we've already spoken about, and cross-text connections. So what you need to know here is that about 28% is going to be focusing on text structure. Another thing that I need to look at, excuse me, is in cross-text connections. Okay, they do this in fourth grade, starting in fourth grade. And really all the way through till, 11th and 12th grade. This is supposed to be done every single year. What's going to happen is they're going to have to read two versions of two texts, okay? It might be two different versions of the same text. It might be the same topic, but they're going to have to read two texts. And after they read both texts, they're going to have to determine which of the questions' answer choices is best supported by evidence in each of the passages. Okay, so this is called cross-text connections. So I went ahead and I did this one here, and you can see that I've used the process of elimination. The question is, based on the texts, the author of text 1 and the author of text 2 would most likely agree with which statement? Okay, so that means that they need to look for the main idea or the purpose of text number 1 and the purpose of text number 2 and find out what they would both agree on. And then, of course, you've got choices that are distractors and the right answer. And it is up to the child to use the process of elimination to eliminate the wrong answer choices and choose the one that is correct. Now, notice what I did out here on the side. This is called annotating. I made marginal notes about what this person's purpose for writing was and what this person's purpose for writing was, because that is going to help me figure out what they would agree with. Okay? If your child is using a textbook in English class, they are learning these skills. Please make sure that you are referring to the standards in your state to make sure that they are being properly prepared for this standardized test. So chapter 14 is giving you, so they're just giving you questions on craft and structure. And as you can see, I went ahead and I did some of these with my daughter, and I love this because then they give you the explanation as to why the answers are correct and why the others are incorrect. So this is a great chapter to practice with. But we are moving on because this presentation is all about information. I'm giving you information since I've already read it and I've dissected it. I am presenting this to you so that you get the shortened version of it. We're moving on to chapter 15, which is the question set of expression of ideas. Okay? So, expression of ideas test their ability to revise passages. They cannot do this unless they are actually creating content. So if they are not writing, they won't know how to revise, because the writing process has revision in it. Okay? So look at this. 20% of this test is on revisions. So if your child is not writing in school and learning how to revise their writing, which, by the way, based on the schools that I've worked at, they're not doing this. Okay? Get your kids to write. Get them a nice journal, give them a topic, get them to practice the racist strategy, and get them to revise. I also have a revision program that they can do. It's very simple. It goes through all of the grammar that they need to know in order to revise and edit. And then I use something called daily language review, which I love. And we practice the skills here. And then I collect their paragraphs, or I collect kids' paragraphs, and we actually edit and revise them together so that they learn the process of revision. And the way that I do it in my classroom is I have them do a paragraph of the week. They take a week to do the best that they can. They have to have an outline. They have to have a main idea. They have to have certain things. The main idea, the key details, they have to have elaboration. Sometimes I'll have them include evidence. And then I will ask them who would like to share their paragraph on we have a TV, on the TV, and I help them, or the class actually helps them revise their paragraph. Like, we'll look for, insignificant words, and we'll change the word choice. We will move sentences around. We will turn simple sentences into complex sentences or compound sentences. We will use subordinate conjunctions to create those complex sentences. We'll use prepositions to elongate sentences. We will just revise the paragraph. And sometimes we take the entire class period, which is 90 minutes, and we'll only do 3 revisions. That's how in-depth we go. But then that student revises it, they submit it, and most likely they're going to get an A because theirs has been revised. And I cannot tell you how powerful that is, because when they take a standardized test, boom, they know exactly. They can pick out the mistakes. They know what needs to be corrected. But they cannot do that unless they are writing and revising. Okay? So 20% is this idea of revisions. Okay, let's look at what it says here. Rhetorical synthesis, which they'll get in high school. With me, they'll get it in the program because I have an analytical basics, which teaches them how to write an analysis. But and I teach this in 7th grade, so don't think you have to wait till 11th grade to do this. No, Okay, in the other school that I was at recently, they waited till 12th grade to do rhetorical analysis, and I was just like, why? But in the standardized test and the SAT, you're going to be tested, or they're going to be tested on their ability to use and combine information and ideas in order to meet specific writing goals. Okay? Revision. And transition words are very, very, very important. I know that a lot of kids don't like when their teachers teach them transition words, but they're super important because they create a logical order and a flow to your writing, and it needs to be included. So these questions are going to test the kid's ability to provide the most logical transition word or phrase in order to link information and ideas and passages. And by the way, I will tell you this. If they are learning text structures and they are applying text structures and they are identifying text structures, that helps with this because text structure has keywords that are used as transitions to connect from one idea to the next. So rhetoric is, again, simply right here, the art of effective writing and speaking. Okay, so like a lot of political comics in the newspaper it's called rhetoric, right? Like you hear the word rhetoric in politics a lot because it's just you expressing your opinion. It's rhetoric, but they use it in a negative way, like, oh, that, Republican rhetoric or the Democratic rhetoric. But it's basically just what they're all saying about a specific topic. So let's look at the features of these types of questions. Okay, so the framing. The framing of the question or how it's presented to you asks you to approach this kind of question as if you were a student taking notes for an assignment. All right, so as you can see, look up here. See how they have bullets? While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. The student wants to introduce Kalo to an audience unfamiliar with the artist. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? So you've got to analyze the notes that the author is taking. Okay? So it says, although this framing isn't really necessary to answering the question, it helps to show you how answering the question is like something you've done many times already and will continue to do in your classes. So bullet points, outlining, those are all really good things to be doing because you're going to be assessed on that strategy. How to use those bulleted lists, how to use those outlines to create a message. All right, so statements in the bulleted list represent the kinds of notes you might take as you read about a topic. So again, if they are not reading from their science book and they're not learning how to outline or bullet information or identify a key detail from an elaboration or an example or a definition, that's a detriment. They need to start reading their textbooks like in the old days. And no more PowerPoints to study. I mean, they can use them to study, but they need to be reading their textbooks. So let's see. Just like real notes, this includes information and ideas relevant to the specific writing goal and may include additional information and ideas that aren't particularly relevant to that goal. All right. Your job will be to distinguish between relevant and irrelevant information and ideas when answering. Wow. We do that when we read our textbooks. Read your textbooks. The rhetorical goal. Okay. The rhetorical or writerly goal specified in the question is critically important to pay attention to. So this right here is your goal right here. That's what your goal is. Okay. There are many potential ways that the information and ideas in the question's bulleted list could be combined into a single sentence, but only one of the 4 answer choices will do so in a way that most effectively meets the specific goal. So again, you need to use the process of elimination because there will be a combination of bullets that you could choose, but they're looking for just one. Your child is also going to get questions on transition words. Okay, it says in real world text, transitions serve to guide and smooth readers' movement between and among sentences, paragraphs, and larger sections of texts. Transition questions are focused on logical connections between and among sentences in brief passages. So it says here are some common transition words. It's an incomplete list because there's so many more. All right, so let's look at these. Oh my gosh, you know what these are? These are text structure keywords. Wow. Description. That's a transition, that's a conclusion. Cause and effect. As such, that would be description. Be that as it may, probably cause and effect. Because, cause and effect. But is contrast. By contrast, in contrast is contrast. Consequently is cause and effect. Conversely, cause and effect. This is sequence. This is description. This is cause and effect. This is description, or it could be sequence. Cause and effect. In addition would be sequence. In conclusion, sequence. Guys, these are text structure keywords. Your child needs to know text structure keywords as well as, subordinating conjunctions and coordinating conjunctions. I just want to show you a couple of questions. You see how they have a paragraph and then you have to put the transition here? So how are you going to study for this? You need to write using transitions. You need to write knowing the text structure. If you know the structure of this paragraph, then you know which keyword to use or which transition word to use. If it's description, you know that you're going to use for example. If it's cause and effect, you're going to use consequently. If it's compare and contrast, you're going to put on the contrary. And let's see, I don't know if regardless fits into any of the text structures, but if it fits here, then you use regardless. But knowing the text structure helps you identify which transition word would best fit in the paragraph. So you've got to know text structure, or your child has to know text structure. Okay, again, in chapter 16, you have the questions that focus on expression of ideas, right? So you've got practice with all of these questions, and then you've got the correct answers and why the other ones are incorrect, which I absolutely love because it's just justifying your choice and explaining why one is better over the other, which I think going through and really looking at that thinking is just amazing. And by the way, they have 4 subtests in this book, and they all do this. They all analyze the choices, and I love that. So this book is a great one. We are now moving on to the last and final part of the reading and writing portion of the SAT, which is editing. Now, a lot of people and kids do not know that there is a difference between editing and revising. Revising is more about word choice. It's more about the vocabulary. It's more about the meaning that you're conveying. This is more about the boundaries in a sentence. So punctuation marks, capital letters, commas, colons, semicolons, stuff like that. Okay, 26%. This is higher than the revision. The revision, I believe, was 20%. 26% is made up of standard English convention questions. Wow, that's a lot. Okay, so let's look at this real quick. Boundary questions. They test your ability to form conventionally complete sentences. They assess form, structure, and sense. It tests your ability to edit text to conform to core usage and punctuation conventions. Editing. We're looking at punctuation. We're looking at capitalization. We're looking at sentence structure. Okay. All right, so boundary questions test your ability to apply your understanding of standard English conventions to ensure that sentences in test passages are conventionally complete. Here they elaborate and they tell you what is conventionally complete. We mean that the sentences express complete thoughts, are structured in standard ways, and are set off from other sentences by appropriate punctuation. All right. So this is all about punctuation marks. Look here. We've got different sentence types right here, declarative and interrogative. So they need to know the different types of sentences. Here, it assesses their knowledge on commas, okay, and punctuation marks. Here, it assesses their knowledge on colons and semicolons and the lack thereof, right? Look, colons. Okay, there you go. They need to know clauses. They need to know, right here, subject verb agreement, pronoun antecedent agreement, verb finiteness, which means gerunds, participles, and infinitives. And I taught all of that in 7th grade. They are totally capable and can do it because I've done it. Subject modifier placement. This one is so funny to teach because a lot of the signs on billboards or like on, like the signs like in parks or whatever, they'll have misplaced modifiers and they're just like really, really funny. And I have, different examples of the kids to look at and we laugh and then we fix them, but it's really funny to teach. So if you do it in a really fun way, it won't be so much of a chore. And here we have like plural possessive forms of nouns, possessives, right? This is all grammar. So you are being tested on grammar. If your child is not being taught grammar, shame on that school. They need to be taught grammar. They need to be doing writing. They need to be doing revisions. This is what English is about. If your child is reading and just answering questions, they are not getting instruction in English. They are not. English is a skills class. It is not a content class. I talk about that in my podcast. Very, very bad misconception because it leads our children, it sets them up for failure. It leads them down the wrong path. Reading is about writing. If they don't know about writing, they will never be proficient in reading comprehension. So please start today. We are done learning all there is to know about the digital SAT reading and writing portion. I am Vanessa Martinez, founder of Back to Basics Learning Co. If you would like more information on how to teach your child the basic skills that are going to lead them to success in their class assignments, on standardized tests, and in all class